So the way I thought we might run this panel would be to ask each of you to take a few minutes and share a little bit of your work so that our guests can see the work you do and hear a little bit from you about your creation. Then we can have a little bit of a conversation as a group, and then we would open it up for questions. Sound good?
Good.
Excellent. Karen, please take it away.
I just start a little bit where I am now, and then I'll tell you my artist journey of how I got there. So at the moment, I'm a resident at TED, and I'm a TED speaker, and I've been fortunate enough to show my work all around the world. But I started on this journey over 10 years ago when I used to work in the music industry, and I kind of felt a responsibility with media, and I felt that I was, as a director, very aware that I was projecting often an image, an identity, or a message onto people. And I've really felt that media could be a much more powerful tool, that it could, I need to go back one, that it should actually make people aware and develop them and empower them in some way. So I started on the journey of how I could do that. And as I was kind of struggling to identify how I could do that, I came across parkour. And parkour is an urban inner city sport. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. Anybody aware of it? Okay, you guys are quite cool in here. Which really focuses on moving from A to B as efficiently as possible. But while you're doing that, you develop your cognitive behavior skills. And it also shows you how to move through your own personal sense of fear. While doing that, I realized that I wanted to recreate that experience of transformation, but through digital media. And I wanted to create immersive experiences and combined film and storytelling and technology and epigenetics and neuroscience and parkour philosophy to create these experiences. I then moved on to a project called Riot. And my experience with Riot is that I really wanted to, as I said, put the participant in the middle of an experience and give them a transformational experience. And my objective with the piece is through doing it, you become aware of your subconscious programming. And also, at the same time, sometimes it's revealed to you how you think you respond may not actually be how you would actually respond in a situation. So you can revisit the experience and consciously rewire your neural pathways in your brain. And just my conclusion to my talk is that at this moment, I think we're living in some remarkable times of global social unrest. And injustice. And as an artist, I feel I have a responsibility through storytelling in some way to empower the participants or the people or just make them more aware. And my objective with my work is through being emotionally involved in them, you affect the narrative of the film experience that you're in. And it's making them aware that in their own life, that their emotions can affect the narrative of their own life. So you can reprogram your brain in a way and go back and be more empowered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Benoit.
Yeah. First, I would like to know if anyone here actually had the time to try transference upstairs. Raise your hand. Oh, quite a few. That's good. I really suggest that you guys go and try it out afterward if you have the courage. Maybe you'll try. You'll think differently after seeing this. Because transference is a psychological thriller. So, it's a co-production with Spectre Vision. This is Elijah Wood's movie company with other partners, and they are actually expert at making thrillers. And we combine our expertise with Ubisoft at making games to create this new type of experience. And this is where Transference was born. So we created the Walter test case. First, the Walter test case, what you see upstairs as the demo, is not part of the full game. It's just a prelude to the game. So Raymond Hayes, the scientist played by the awesome Macon Blair, did some controversial researches, and he digitalized the mind of a troubled patient that suffered from PTSD. And with his program in a VR headset, you're able to go through part of his memory. So through puzzles, you're able to move some important objects that have some big narrative significance, and it's making the whole thing start to have really crazy reaction. So it could be quite unsettling at some points. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you. I thought I'll try to cram my last 15 years into 5 minutes. I don't know if it's a good thing or depressing thing that you cram 15 years into 5 minutes. The reason why I assembled a bunch of projects I did over the last 15 years is because I realized I think every project had something of working within constraints, but also breaking something that I was frustrated in technology and moving it to a different space through an artistic approach. And the very first project, that should be the opposite of those slides. I'll just start talking about it. Wait until it comes up. Well, you're right. If I control this, there we go. It's all me.
All backwards.
All backwards. Here. So that was 2002, I think. The very first thing I actually I did as a graduation project when I was still a student in Germany. And this is all done in computer graphics. None of this is hand-drawn. But my co-director, Jacob, he came from traditional kind of illustration and design, and I came from computer graphics. And through our collaboration, I realized the amount of kind of artistic decisions the computer makes without you wanting the computer to make them. And I realized that through Jacob doing hand-drawn designs and me trying to create them in the computer and realizing it's really hard to meet them. So a lot of the designs you see here, what we basically did is we removed the mathematical perfection from the computer, because that's what a computer gives you. In a computer, if you build a set and you put a camera somewhere, if something is farther away, like on the right-hand side, these kind of garage boxes, it will be mathematically perfectly scaled down, and you look perfectly. Normally, you would look underneath this top opening door, but design-wise, it looks nicer if you look on top of it. So we basically faked everything in the computer to counter what the computer does perfectly well. Not that it's bad that the computer does something perfectly well, but it becomes very inhuman and not artistically directed. The same thing with the characters. None of the arms had perfect lengths. They would always change lengths, because if you would draw them, you would always vary, and there's a human touch that you lose if you blindly just follow what the computer gives you. So that's kind of a bit how it all began, that struggle between art and technology and the way to make them sing together. And then 2 years later, there was the weirdest project, and I wanted to mention this because I like strange projects. So again, Jacob and me, we were on a commercial. We got a request for a pitch-in from McKinsey & Company, who's a consultant company. And they had a birthday party in Berlin, and they own half the buildings on the main street there. And some of them are museums, and they said the exhibits are boring. We just want to spice them up with some video installations. So this amazing... So they knew nothing about art, so they hired one of the best theater opera dramaturgs to basically curate it, and his request was, well, this is going to be about movement, you have 3 screens you can project on, do something. And Jacob and I didn't have any time, so our producer was like, we can't have this project disappear, so he just wrote a script, and then he won it, and he was like, yeah, but I'm not going to direct this, you guys do it. And his script was basically an old man gets into a car, drives off a cliff, and on the other side crashes into his old love. Like, okay. So we basically created this 10-minute, 3-screen projection piece out of it. But the most beautiful thing about it was we had freedom to just kind of do stream of consciousness exploration. Like the old guy became a robot because it was easier to do with computers. Otherwise, we would have basically spent 90% of our time just dealing with this, well, we need to fully animate an old guy. Like this way, it became 10% of the production budget and time. And that's where I realized if you work with computers, you need to be really aware of how much work something is. Because you might do something that you think is just 10% of your creative work that ends up being 90% of the budget and of the time it takes, which is, of course, in no proportion at all. So you always kind of need to find the marriage that works best and not fight against what's really difficult. This was then just a weird shootout. We had all these things that lived in our heads. So at one point we just decided, let's just put them into the real world and just kind of shoot some stuff and track them into it and just see what happens. And I made a Christmas card out of it. But it became the beginning out of me exploring the real world mixed with CG and what is kind of the conversation between the two. And in a weird way, these early projects are kind of what now you have in AR through your phone, but in a very early time where it was all more kind of brute force by hand. Then I got actually bored with Germany and doing my own projects. I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. So I thought I want to move to a different continent. So I moved to the US, and then I started at Pixar. I thought I'll give up doing projects myself, and then I couldn't. So I pitched basically a short film at Pixar, and that became the Blue Umbrella. And in an interesting way, everything I had done before, as you can see, was super stylized and cartoony. And then I was at Pixar, and out of some reason, I was like, I want to do something that is full-on photoreal, and you don't even think that it's animation. But bring over the learnings I had gotten from doing something super stylized. But I found the idea fascinating too, in a time where animation looks so good, doing something that feels like it's actually the real world. So breaking that preconception a bit. But then after that, I got bored again, so I left and then started with a bunch of friends story studio for Oculus to explore how to do narratives in VR, basically how do you merge that technology with an art form and with narrative. And the first project we did was Lost, and I think the most interesting thing we learned from it was how to get someone into an experience. Basically, there's this weird thing you put on the headset and you still have all your memories from where you were just a second ago in the real world. And there was not really a transition into this magical world that you have when you go to a movie, where you go to the movie, you sit on the cinema, there's commercials, the lights go off, and all these things. And it's literally a ritual that we by now are trained to forget our lives and descend into that world. And we kind of focus on this a lot to recreate that in VR because that jump is so instant. But meanwhile, I still kind of experimented, met a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine now, who's a dancer. I was like, dance is amazing. It's all about space and it's all about movement around you. And so we basically just shot a short dance video, and that then turned into a VR piece about dance, because we realized when you're in an audience of a ballet piece, you sit still, but your mind moves with the dancers. So in VR, you could actually move the audience around the dancers. You could get a sense of how it feels like to dance with the dancers and really feel like you're there on the stage in that way and not have that screen separate you. So that's what we started exploring with this, even though it started as just like, can we just shoot something one evening? Which brings me to the last piece, which is here as well, the Angelica, which was again, VR and computers are such a horrible, artificial, kind of human texture, empty medium. In animation, you always fight the whole production to keep a bit of the humanity of the original designs to survive until the very end. And I wanted to fight that in a way, so I wanted to create a piece that is fully illustrated by a person, and you can feel in every stroke that a person is behind it, to basically do the opposite of what the medium is, which is so technical and so inhuman, and humanize it through telling something like this, and explore the idea of creation in a way, because you draw one line, it just looks like a line. You draw a second line, it still looks like it's just two lines. And then you draw a third line, and suddenly your brain interprets it as a face. And there is this magic of that middle moment between nothing and something that is so inherent in drawing, but is also so inherent in virtual reality, where there is nothing and then you're somewhere. And it's that threshold that I think is the most magical, not the before or the after, but that middle moment. 15 years in a nutshell.
Thank you.
I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore. It used to be called Yugoslavia. I was born in Belgrade. And then in 90s, when I was 8 years old, the war broke, and my whole teens was just war and violence and protesting on the streets against the regime. And then afterwards, I studied film, and then I moved to New York. And in New York, I met Marina Abramovic, the performance artist from my country and from my same city, but who left in 70s, so she really didn't live in my country. And then we started working together So kind of my teens was this war surrounding, and then my 20s was Marina Abramovic, and then now afterwards I started creating my own VR pieces or projects. The first project I made is called Giant, together with Winslow, who will be speaking later, and it is about war, and that's actually a topic I never wanted to talk about because I was thinking I'm done with it, so I can move on and live a normal life, you know. But that is part of me, and I met the scriptwriter Lizzie Donahue, and I told her the story of us growing up, and you know, I actually thought. Because when you're a teenager, when the war is all around you, that you think that's reality for everyone. You don't know that there is a different life in 90s going on somewhere else in the world, you know, like a normal life. So I told her about my life, and she said, this sounds like a movie. You know, she is from United States of America. So we decided together, why don't we create a script that speaks about a family that is hiding in a basement during war. And they have, and let's make this family into a Western family, into a family that is the least likely at this moment in time to experience such a thing, that is a family that usually just reads about war and thinks it's always happening to someone else. In fact, I thought this is never going to happen to me as well. Because I wanted to, once I decided to share how it is to be in a war, I wanted to really actually communicate it through emotions, not through intellectual way. So that's a family with a 6-year-old daughter, and they cannot tell her that the war is going on outside. So they start telling her it's a friendly giant, all these noises, and it's actually bomb blasts that are coming closer and closer into that basement where you are seated with the family. And it's a giant that wants to play with a little girl. So everything becomes playful and terrifying, and you're witnessing that moment. But this is really tailored for the Western audience, so they can identify with the family at risk. If someone speaks and looks and dresses like them, I thought hopefully they will have a more emotional connection. So through those emotions, they will understand what is going on with a lot of people right now on the planet, because war is something that it's not really just now. It's almost ever since humankind exists. So we premiered Giant at Sundance, and we created a dark installation, dark room that resembles a basement. So you enter that room. We created chairs that vibrate whenever there is a bomb blast, so you feel it in your body as well. And we got a lot of strong reactions from people. And finally, we started having conversations, gave thousands of hugs at Sundance, and people kept going out crying and saying, okay, we now actually understand what is happening to someone else in the world. And then after that, we just went on literally with the computers, with those chairs. We just traveled the globe and all the probably 40 festivals. Once a week we started traveling. And then towards the end of that year, we continued because we thought, okay, if Giant speaks about humans destroy each other, that's not really all that we as humans do. We also destroy nature. So why don't we show that? So that was our second piece that is actually showing here, that is called Tree. And in Tree, we again, because we wanted to speak about climate change, but again, we didn't want to tell you, okay, in 1 minute, 1,000 trees are being, cut off or anything, to scare you with these facts that at this moment have nothing to do with you, but will have in the near future. So if we don't have as humans immediate problems, and if it's not our problem, we tend to not take care of that problem. We tend to think that doesn't exist. So we decided to actually make it very personal and make you into a tree in a rainforest, and see if we can communicate again through emotions, again through embodiment of a tree, if we can achieve this message in just taking a different perspective. So in our piece, you actually grow from a seed into a full-grown tree. Your body is a seed first, you're underground, then you start getting branches, your arms are branches, your body is a trunk. You enjoy the nature, enjoy butterflies, birds, everything. And once you fall in love with this forest, then humans start coming. and take it away from you. So that was our second piece, and really we are so happy and proud how Phi Centre set it up. It's such a beautiful setting. So if you guys didn't see it, it's amazing moment to see it. And then finally, it's actually a trilogy, because we are showing these two kind of distraction moments in humankind. So we thought, let's do the third part of the trilogy that speaks about hope and what can we all collectively do together. So right now we are in a early stages of a pre-production for Breathe. That's the name of the project.
So I thought that we might approach this as helping our guests go through the journey that an artist goes through. How you start from a project, take it through the creation, all the way through its exhibiting or distribution. So let's sort of have our questions go in that journey. So Harold Bloom wrote this influential book called The Anxiety of Influence. And in it, he says that every great poet has to struggle with their father poet, basically the big influence that preceded them, and has to sort of do battle with that influence in order to find their own voice or to create something original. And he uses the metaphor of Oedipus and Laios at the crossroads doing battle, the father and son. And so he sort of suggests in this description that there is no true originality, that in fact you are just coming up with a way of reinterpreting the influences that came before you. And so I put this question to you because I think that all of you are actually really innovators, and you are pushing storytelling forward in very unique ways. Do you feel that you're doing something original? Are you very aware of the influences that are behind your thinking? How do you think about influence when you start a project? Are you conscious of it?
I start with how I want my participants to feel and what it is I'm trying to say. That's my starting point. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I build a story. And after I've created the feeling and the narrative, way further down the line do I look at the technology. Mm-hmm. So I use artificial intelligence and machine learning and facial recognition. And prior to that, I used EEG head sensors that would be on your head, and that your focus would determine the branching narrative. But in Riot, your anxiety, your fear, your calm will determine the narrative. So I came to that conclusion because I realized I wanted to reveal to people how they would respond in a certain situation, to show them the person who they thought they were may not be who they actually would be, and how could I help them become their most truest sense of self. So that was my premise. And then I was very aware of what was happening in the world. In 2014, I was very much inspired by the Ferguson riots. Mm-hmm. So that is what really was the catalyst for me to show how would you respond may not be how you think you respond, and definitely wouldn't be how the news was maybe telling you may be responding in this situation. So then it was obvious, it has to be something like a non-perceptive technology that it's revealed to you like magic. So it was like, what could do that for you? So that was my journey. But in terms of the kind of preoccupation with being original, and that doesn't even come into my awareness. I just kind of, the thing I do, which is probably really completely weird, is that I just really focus on, in like a spiritual sense, just being myself in my life, and then that will feed into my work. So if I come like parkour, if I'm living from a sense of fear in my life, my work will reflect that, because I think often as creators, our work reflects who we are. Mm-hmm. So if I can just like embrace fear and move through fear and just attack life, and then the kind of stories I should make should reflect that. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that would help people do the same. So I'm not preoccupied with what other people are doing, because I think that could be a slippery slope. Mm-hmm.
There's always a chance that your product gets associated with something else. Mm-hmm. But let's say when the collaboration started, it was mostly about like a narrative context that Spectre Vision brought to say like what it would feel to be inside someone's consciousness that was digitalized. And after that came the idea of like how weird it would be to discover dark secrets, the stress that it could create, like trying to dig deeper and find about these. and how we could do that through puzzles and ideas. And after that, it's really important, I guess, not to get too much copying other stuff. Because when you work on a big AAA production, when there's hundreds of millions that are invested, for sure, investors don't want to take too many risks. But this is what it's awesome about the Funhouse. The goal is to be innovative, try to do something new. And so often we had another big project, show me another game that's making this. And to prove it right or wrong. It's like, no. And now we have almost like carte blanche to try to define new things. So the feeling, after that, the feeling came afterward to say, like, as we're doing this, it's amazing how you could feel anxiety. There's some buildup of tensions. But after that, yet at the same time, you feel sympathy or empathy. I still have a difficulty to compare both, but we had a discussion about semantics at the other time. But you feel emotion toward that. However, it's your curiosity that it's pushing you to go through that anxiety. We don't force anyone. Anyone that wants to stop, they just remove the headset. But still, they want to go on. They want to discover that mystery. So it's the interest that's pushing them to feel anxiety. But after that, at the same time, feel connection and emotion related to these characters that are part of that experience. So yeah.
I think there's to that question for me. There's two answers. One is towards my internal, just me as an individual, and the second part is like me as a part of a whole. Of other people, of other artists. I think each project for me starts with, I know there is something I want to express, I just don't know exactly what it is, but I know that it's there. And it's really hard because you need to pitch a project to someone and convince them what the final project will be, and I just know there's a spark, there's something that is strong, but to a certain extent creating the whole thing is actually finding the words to express it.
Does that come from trial and error? Does that
you
discovery?
throw different costumes onto the thing you do. You write different drafts, you do different things, and then you see, no, this doesn't seem to fit. You don't know why it doesn't fit. You just know, like, no, this is wrong. And when you throw something on it that is right, you know this is right. And it's kind of like as if you're blind and trying to find your way, and you know when you're a bit off track if you listen to yourself. And you know when you're right, but the only way to do that is like to throw things at it, to do steps, and then realize, and those steps make you realize, oh no, this was a wrong step, but you need to do the step, otherwise you can't judge it. So it's really this strange process each time, and at the end you know exactly what it was that you wanted to say, which hopefully feels close to what you started out with, just expressed in a piece of work. So that's for me as an individual. And the whole thing is also just finding out who am I, what am I thinking, what is my relationship to the topic. Like, so much is exploration and self-inspection of that. But then on the larger scale, in context of others who came before me and then other people doing other work, this is a good friend of mine from high school. She's a biologist. And I visited her in Austria. And she was doing these, experiments with some algae thing in a tiny kind of petri dish, and day in, day out, and then observing them, and it takes like 3 years to do it. And it's part of like thousands of other biologists around the world doing variations of this experiment. And one person will kind of get a Nobel Prize or whatever for the research, and all the other stuff will fail. But you can't get there without all of it. And I feel like, in a bit more positive light, all of us creating something is part of a larger whole. I think, in a way, and that's more spiritual for me, I think humanity as a whole, for me at least, to make myself as an artist happy, I don't think evolution to a certain extent is about survival. I think it's about expression. Because we've standing on the shoulders of so many people on the artistic side, poetry side, whatever, trying to express something that then influences us, that then influences more people. So it is nearly like a whole experiment of everyone always trying to express themselves and feeding into this evolution of figuring us and the world and humanity out. And I'm a tiny, 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 tiny part of that, but it's only possible with that whole. So in a way, yes, I react to people that come before me and are with me, but I think it's more an ideally an in harmony thing, everyone together in their personal ways. So you need to focus on what you specifically bring to it. So that's why you're important, because you're different than everyone else.
Right. And obviously you spoke about your experience as a child, which was so profound in your influence for the work.
Yeah, but at the same time, yeah, your question is very interesting, and in different moments of my life, I would have different answer, I guess, to give you. But for example, when I studied film in my country, it's in my country the film school is you have to choose if you want to study camera, directing, editing. Like you have to already choose before starting the school, and then you focus on that. And obviously, I always wanted to study directing, but 2 months before that exam, which is really, really hard. The exam, it's like 7 days of like levels of entering, like, and only like 7 people can get into, the school. So 2 months before, I actually gave up. I decided, no, I'm not going to study directing. I'm going to focus on editing because I'm never going to be as good as Fellini. That's what I thought. And I convinced myself not to do it, and then I started editing. And then, because my father is actually a theater director, and it's very famous in my country, and then people tend to think, oh, it's easy for you, your father is going to help you. So I grew up like listening to these things. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to move to New York after school, where my father doesn't know anyone, so I'm going to start from zero. And find my own way. And then finally now, after making all of this happen and possible, I just was in my country until like 2 days ago for the first time showing 3 there to the audience in Serbia, Belgrade, and I woke up one morning and I've been trying to run away from this influence of my father, and he is an avant-garde theater director because he brought theater on the streets of Belgrade in the 80s, and actually I was born in that environment, and that's all I knew about is like experimental theater. But then I woke up one morning in Belgrade and I said, who actually influenced me most in my life? And I never even, wanted to admit that. It's actually you. And then it's not a coincidence. When you look backwards in your life, you see all the dots, how you ended up where you are right now. Like, why was I working with Marina Abramovic, who herself is a pioneer in everything she does? She's breaking new grounds all the time, and I was just there in a background working as an editor, filmmaker for her, and like helping her like push these boundaries until there was a moment for me to step out and get that courage and step in front of the world and start doing my own projects. And that's all I'm interested to do, is to do projects that have never been done, to use tools that have never been done, to tell stories that haven't been told, and to touch audiences in new ways. So I guess I admire so many artists, directors, musicians, and I can't unsee that and unhear it. It's part of who I am. But at the same time, I'll conclude this with a conversation with a Tibetan monk I had, and he was like, he grew since he was 4 years old. He was a monk, and I was talking to him when he was in his 30s. So that's his practice his whole life. And he told me about the practice, living in a monastery, praying and reaching different levels of consciousness. And I told him, wow, I wish I learned and I felt things you felt. And he said, no, don't think like that, because you can never compare yourself to anyone else. All of us have different paths and different lives. So don't ever compare yourself. So don't look at other person's lane, look at your lane. But do acknowledge, yes, that other people are influencing you, and the world is everything we see, breathe, or live influences us. So it's kind of both.
So it's a nice segue into this next question, which is, once you have a sense of an inclination of the story or the ideas that you want to express, the emotions that you want to express, how do you then go about choosing the technologies? Because all of you have used such interesting and unique choices. And I also want to add, most people use technology for like information processing or data storage, or you guys are using it to create emotions, to tell stories. How do you go about choosing the tech that you use?
On our end, again, what triggered this whole discussion was VR. Again, the collaboration. This is how it started. What VR could bring, how you could feel differently, how you could, the sense of immersion, being part of there, connecting more with the characters that you see, feel immersed of trying to find what to do and having this, again, this emotional experience. So in our case, VR was kind of the red line. It was kind of a must
chosen
for
up
us.
front.
Yeah, exactly. But also, we want other people to be able to see it. So it's going to be accessible also in non-VR to make sure everyone could see. For sure, it's less immersive. It's best in VR, but still the player will be able to have all of that experience through non-VR, so everyone could play it, so it's more accessible. So we try to compensate, like the diagram this morning, so it's more accessible. But then again, those that have a VR headset at least could have the full experience. But in our case, that was definitely VR was the thing that triggered the whole thing.
I think there's a romantic answer and then there's a realistic answer. And to be honest, I think they're combined. The realistic answer is wherever the money is. Like if there's investment in VR, then I'll tell my stories in VR. But it doesn't mean that I shoehorn a story into a medium. I think all the projects I've done, what I wanted to express could have been a film, could have been a VR thing, could have been a poem, could have been a short story. I think what I'm trying to express is universal. But the way you're expressing it is unique to the medium. Like otherwise, there would never ever be a film adaptation of a book. And successful film adaptation embrace the medium of film to express it in a unique way that the book couldn't. And you can never ever compete with a book because the inner monologue that becomes your inner monologue in your mind as you read it, you can never compete with in anything else. So it is a bit more that, but I do love the energy that comes from clashing tech and art together, because it's a challenge for both. And out of that friction arises something interesting. So in regards of choosing, I would always choose something where there is that friction, where I can find something that challenges me and that challenges the medium in a way.
And particularly, I know with Dear Angelica, you had to create tools. You literally created the quiver. Is that the right name?
Quill.
Quill.
Yeah.
Sorry, Quill.
Yeah, because there were drawing tools in VR before, but again, it goes all the way back to that first bunnies piece, the kind of the rabbits thing and 2D looking CG, where the realization of the computer by default has an artistic voice if you don't actively go against it. So with Quill as a drawing software, the idea was if you draw a line by default, it should look really boring because the computer shouldn't add any sparkles or any tapering or any whatever stuff on top of it at all that needs to be the artist's voice. So we always said the tool needs to not have an artistic opinion. And computers by default always have something because they're supposed to make something easier. But if you make something easier, you become part of the creation. So that again, that was that clash again, and that kind of challenge of how to keep the human texture in something that's so artificial.
About 10 years ago, as a filmmaker, I realized that interactivity and technology was going to become a big part of storytelling in terms of that's the language that young people are really starting to interact with the world with. So for me to kind of connect with them, I had to use technology, particularly to introduce messages which I felt they may be not receiving through mainstream media. And And then also I kind of inverting it, because I find that technology can kind of isolate people, but I want to use technology to reconnect with your humanity in a way, by putting you in the center of a story and letting your emotions navigate through. I consciously use technology as that tool, but use it in a way which I feel is almost as imperceptible. So with Riot, I use, as I said, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and facial recognition all combined. And that wasn't even something I could Google. It wasn't, I didn't even know of anybody doing that. And the partners I work with, Benoit University, was like leading experts in facial recognition and artificial intelligence, and combined that with my other partners in storytelling, who were the National Theatre Immersive Storytelling Studio, to kind of find this new language of storytelling, where you're not really aware of the tech. That I'm not really tied to any specific technology, but my thing at the moment is that I want you to not be aware of what's happening to you, so that you don't put a device on, so that as you then go into your daily life, it's a reflection of your reality. Like I really believe we're kind of almost living every day in a VR simulation. And I'm using my experiences to kind of download new software to you, to improve you in some way. So, and then I add another layer, because I'm competing with people who are creating VR experiences which are very immersive. So then I'll utilize an ambisonic 3D sound to put you in that space, which is the closest to a human ear. So I'm constantly honing these experiences, but it's all consciously done with this specific intention. And then when I have a specific intention, the technology kind of selects itself in a way.
Well, for me, it really starts with the story, and through the work I do, I really always want to share something I deeply believe in, and with the hope that it can transform something in the audience, but through storytelling. Again, not by direct messaging or anything like that, but almost through like going through the story or. So then, so it starts with the story. What is that story? We start developing, and then around that we start adding, like, how can we make it happen? What technology is the best? It could be a film, it could be AR, VR, anything. For example, 3. At this moment in time, I cannot imagine any other technology that will make you into a 3 as of today. So we had to choose VR. But who knows, for anything next. It's just a tool. It's just a way to express yourself.
I guess sometimes what's important is how much you want the participant, the player, to be interacting with the environment, or like having what is his ability, what is able to do, how deep the level of agency, or that player could be drive himself through his own volition of sense of he wants to pursue. So what are the tools you're going to give to the player to be able to interact, to progress? So I guess that's going to be a big factor in terms of what technology you should use.
And how do you feel the audience is responding? Are these moments where people are running out of the theater because the train's racing towards them? or are they staying and embracing it?
Yes, I mean, we are in that stage still, I think. So many people that are coming to see our experiences are seeing VR for the first time, still after 2 years of showing pieces. And we are getting constantly strong reactions from, screaming, crying, hugs, amazement. Of course, there are people who don't react, who don't like it, but there are really less of them than the other side. So the reactions of the audience, and because Winslow and I traveled physically to probably 60 festivals or even more, I can't even know, because it's been 2 years, as I said, once a week. So we met the audience. We were on the ground with the people and having these interactions. And because of that, we know that we have to keep going, because the audience wants us to keep going with this. So it is an amazing moment in time to do this.
A neuroscientist told me, and I'm sure you guys are so savvy, but children as young as 8 years old cannot decipher the difference between memories and VR experiences, right?
Yep.
So how these experiences are affecting people is unsurpassed in my lifetime in terms of storytelling. And the effects that I'm getting with my experiences, I'm even shocked. I mean, I had the intention to empower the user in some way and make them aware of their subconscious selves, and then give them the opportunity to go back into the experience and reprogram their behavior. But then I've shown my work all over the world like yourself, and people have come back and said to me, oh, I needed to talk to you. I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, I did your experience and I went home and then I realized how I wasn't facing my fear in my life, and I had a conversation with my mum, and then I cried and then she cried, and I came back and then you were looking at me and I wasn't aware of her at all, and I thought, shall I come and talk to you? And I felt very self-conscious, and now I need to tell you that I'm going to make those changes in my life. And I was like, you're talking to me? Like, you know, I really had these ambitions, but this is almost beyond my expectation. And then you have people who are come out vindicated and feel courageous, and people who come out feeling crying and emotionally cathartic. And I've had to, I'm going to talk about this in the second one, had to build in like this emotional decompression part of the experience, because there is this responsibility. You're taking people through a journey and how we're affecting them. I feel really kind of honored that we're artists and we have a sense of integrity. We're not advertising agencies just making money. So we kind of feel this honor in we're all on this together, and you know, how we're affecting you. We want to continue doing this in the best possible way. That's why I think it's really amazing time for storytellers and artists to have these tools, because they're so powerful. That it's kind of like you can trust them with us. Like I did a panel and a lady said, you know, I'm really worried about you using this technology. I'm like, listen, don't worry, sister, we're the good guys. It's the police and the government and the security companies who've had this stuff for like, you know, decades that you really need to worry about.
The first time we showed Transference was at E3 in Los Angeles in early June. And that was the first time that we unveiled it, and it was pretty fascinating to see people's eyes when they removed the headset, what they got out of it. You still see that they're connecting the dots. We didn't know that it was going to have that much impact on people. For sure, we did it in a way that we planned it. We were never explicit to say, this is a story, or else it would be passive and there's no question asked. But we planted so many narrative dots in different forms of what is he here, what is he saying? Like, is there a hint where there's like text and he's connecting that with the message from the other character? We let the player to connect and make his own story. But the surprise that they had, the effect that everyone tried to put on it to be more immersed, and still the fact that we're cheating from the subject of someone that suffered from PTSD. At E3 in the demo booth, we actually had, and not at the same time, hopefully, but 2 people that suffered from PTSD from the army, and their reaction, they were all sweaty afterward, and they were like, it seems like they were really, really affected. And they say like, it's amazing how you guys nailed that feeling. It's like, nobody studied like what does a PTSD feeling feel like. Right. But see how much to them it connected so much, and they were so thankful to be able to revisit this type of feeling, but in a safe environment. We had no idea, like at the beginning, that we would have that. We didn't plan for that at all.
So I have one last question, and we don't all have to answer because I want to leave a little time for everyone else. But is there you guys are using tools, right, that people haven't really used that much before? Traditionally, in art, you spend a lot of time apprenticing, learning how to do all the classic paint strokes, or before you go off and become Picasso and go do something cool with it. So my question to you is, what is an insight or an interesting learning that you've had from being at the bleeding edge of using these technologies to tell stories? Is there something you can think of that you would find either funny or profound to share with the group?
Well, nothing is easy.
Nothing is easy.
Because technology is like, literally we are getting like headsets as they come out of the factory, with no one tested, and the other technology. And then we try to use software in the way it wasn't used. So when you put those two together, it doesn't work. It doesn't work until, like, we usually premiere at Sundance, so it starts working 2 hours before the premiere starts, somehow, miraculously. So it is very stressful, very difficult, and you need to like look for the teams. We work with people all around the world. Where we are finding certain kind of talent, coders, developers, visual effect artists, filmmakers, and putting them together, and all of us together are like coming up with a solution to the problem. So
it's a team
always,
sport.
Yeah, it's like a problem resolving is working in VR now, I think.
Everybody here is literally doing something which has never been done before. And that seriously requires a lot of optimism and belief and commitment and a great team and good communication and appreciation to get it done. And I will put money very low on that list. Even though money's nice, it's a team that you say, like, it's half an hour before the door's going to open, it still doesn't work, but you all believe it's going to work and you're going to make sure it works.
It's trying and failing, but mostly keep trying. There's actually 3 designers in the room here that work on transference, and God knows like how many times we restart. But then also this new technology, there's no much like guide and like here's a perfect experience. You created this way, this way, this way. So it's by trying. This is actually what got me back to Ubisoft, I guess for the 3rd time. But after 20 years, like you need to rethink how you do games, and this is what that was exciting because after 20 years, you're gonna know how to make a game, and it's become like you're getting used to it. But now, like you need to relearn all over again, and that part is so interesting. But also to do it with a team. The team in that model is so important because everyone is trying. We try to give a sense of direction, and after that, with what they have, their inspiration, and we try to orchestrate that to build an experience. But in the end, it's the team as a whole that's trying and keep pushing, even though if it was easy, like, again, everybody would do it. But this is why like we need to keep trying, we need to keep faith, and sometimes it's tough to keep motivating a team when it's not say like, oh, we're gonna go this way and we're gonna do it exactly like this. We're gonna keep the planning like exactly like we planned. It never go like this. But it's important that everyone have the same spirit of wanting to push to create new things.
Yeah, I would say VR is the worst. Like it's the worst medium to work in if you want a smooth process. Like, don't do it. I mean, there's no references you can look at as like guidance, like you have decades of film to look at as like, oh, like this or like this. You speak the same language because you've seen the same films and you can kind of communicate. In VR, it feels like you try to formulate things, but everyone is differently in their head. No one has any real artistic experience in it for years and years. Like if you do a movie, you work with a really good editor whose job is editing and pacing and timing so you can do top-level decisions. Doesn't exist, that skill set. And then 3rd, the tools are a disaster. And by disaster, I don't mean they could be better. I mean, everyone uses a computer, so everyone knows what an undo feature is. On De Angelica, yes, I had a timeline, but when I hit play to watch it, I would lose all undos. I couldn't try something, hit play, and then I undo my change. Like, didn't work. So we're talking about basic core functionality that is broken and doesn't work. So it's thought, even in Unity, I just used the new timeline feature. You change the length of a clip on one side, and for some reason on the other side it changed. You're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like it's rudimentary stuff that does not function.
Right. Blunt
so
tools.
You take these 3 problems and you mash them together, and you probably have the worst working environment you could ever have to do something creative. But we're doing it anyhow.
Yeah.
And you have a group of people who are doing it anyhow, despite all of that. And none of us have any idea what we're doing. Because, I mean, I went through 4 years of film school, and afterwards no one would say I'm an established filmmaker and I don't know what I'm doing. You can't go through 4 years of VR school. You're just kind of making it up as you go, and you try to figure it out together with people who also have no idea what they're doing. And then you just try to create something. But we're doing it anyhow. And I think part of it is that, yeah, fuck it, we're doing it anyhow.
Well, thank you guys for doing it anyhow. Well, I think we're just about at time, a couple of minutes early, but I wanted to thank you guys so much for being here, for participating, for sharing your wisdom. I certainly want to encourage everyone here to go upstairs and experience these beautiful pieces. These are the pioneers who are investigating, struggling, trying despite all odds to use these new tools to create new kinds of storytelling. And I hope you'll experience them all. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.